Lettuce is the fastest crop in this entire series. It can go from seed to your plate in as little as 30 days, faster than almost anything else we've grown together this season. But that speed comes with a catch nobody mentions up front. It's also the crop with the shortest window before everything goes wrong at once. 1 week you have a thriving bed of fresh greens, glossy and crisp, and exactly what you pictured when you planted the seeds. The next week, the same plants have shot up 2 feet tall, turned bitter, and become completely inedible, and there was no dramatic disease, no visible pest, nothing you could point to and say that was the moment it happened. The difference between a season of continuous salads and a bed of tall, bitter stalks you're embarrassed to have grown comes down to a handful of decisions, mostly made before you even plant the first seed. That's what this video covers. Here's the plan: why lettuce and timing are inseparable, more than with any other crop we've covered this season. The types worth knowing and how each one behaves differently, because lettuce is doing about as much hiding as onion was 2 episodes ago. Starting seeds and transplanting. The cut and come again harvest technique that stretches one planting into weeks of greens. The one problem that ends most lettuce seasons early, what causes it, and the 3 things that delay it. The diseases and pests worth watching for. And succession planting, which is the single habit that separates gardeners who eat salad all season from ones who had 1 good week in May, and then nothing. Hey, before we start, drop a comment and let me know where you're growing from. Lettuce timing is genuinely climate-specific, and knowing whether you're battling Texas heat or Wisconsin winter shapes almost everything about how this crop is going to go for you. A biological clock, not a skill problem. Lettuce is a cool season crop. That's not a preference or a suggestion. It's a biological reality that controls almost everything about how the plant behaves, in the same way the day-length trigger controlled everything about onions a couple episodes back. Lettuce grows its best leaves in temperatures between 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. As temperatures climb toward 80, quality starts declining, the leaves getting thinner and less crisp even before anything looks visibly wrong. Above 85, bolting begins, and once it does, the plant's productive life as food is essentially over, no matter how much you water it or how carefully you fed it. This means growing great lettuce is primarily a timing challenge, not a skill challenge. And that's a genuinely freeing thing to understand if you've ever felt like a failure over a bolted lettuce bed, watching a plant you fed and watered carefully turn bitter anyway. The gardener who understands when their local temperatures will cross that threshold and works backward from that date will consistently outperform a more experienced gardener who ignores timing entirely and just plants lettuce whenever tomatoes usually go in, on the assumption that one warm season planting calendar fits every crop in the garden equally. 4 plants, 1 name. There are 4 broad categories of lettuce worth knowing, and picking blind off a seed rack without understanding the differences is one of the most common ways new lettuce growers end up disappointed. Leaf lettuce is the loosest and most forgiving, producing a rosette of leaves you can harvest continuously rather than waiting for a single head to form. Best suited to cut and come again harvesting, fastest to maturity, and most heat-tolerant of the 4 types, which makes it the natural starting point for a first-time lettuce grower. Varieties like black-seeded Simpson and salad bowl are widely available, fast, and about as forgiving as lettuce gets. Butterhead, including Boston and Bibb types, forms a soft, loose head with tender, almost buttery leaves, takes longer to mature, and is slightly less forgiving of heat than leaf lettuce. The texture is genuinely different from anything you get in a bag of mixed greens at the store, which is one of the better arguments for growing it yourself rather than buying it. Romaine forms an upright, elongated head with crisper leaves and notably longer heat tolerance than Butterhead, taking 60 to 80 days compared to 30 to 45 for leaf types. Romaine's extra heat tolerance makes it a reasonable choice for gardeners in slightly warmer regions who still want a head-forming type rather than the loose leaf style. Paris Island Cos is one of the more widely grown romaine varieties specifically for its balance of heat tolerance and reliable head formation, and it's a common recommendation for anyone stepping up from leaf lettuce into their first head-forming type. Crisp head, the category that includes iceberg, is the most demanding to grow at home, needing a longer cool season to form a tight head, and it's genuinely the type most likely to disappoint a beginner, since it combines the longest time commitment with the narrowest tolerance for anything going even slightly wrong along the way. Crisp head varieties typically need 80 to 90 days of reliably cool weather to head up properly, which simply doesn't exist in a lot of climates without a very carefully timed spring or fall window. And a head that doesn't fully form due to an untimely heat spike is a genuinely disheartening result after nearly 3 months of care. New growers should start with leaf or butterhead types and save crisp head for a season or two down the road once the timing instincts described in this episode are second nature. Timing, starting, and spacing. Before you buy seeds or prep your bed, know 2 dates: your last expected spring frost date and the date your daytime temperatures typically and consistently cross 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Work backward from that second date. Lettuce planted 4 to 6 weeks before temperatures regularly hit 80 gives you the best shot at a full productive spring window, rather than a rushed couple of harvests before the heat shuts everything down. Lettuce seeds need soil temperature of at least 40 degrees and do best between 60 and 68. Press the tiny seeds just barely into the surface, no more than 1/8 of an inch deep. Lettuce seeds actually need some light to germinate properly, which is why burying them too deep is a common reason for poor germination. A detail that surprises a lot of gardeners used to the rule of deeper is safer from other crops. Starting transplants indoors 3 to 4 weeks before your last frost date gives you a slight head start, though direct sowing works perfectly well and is genuinely the more common approach for lettuce specifically, given how quick and forgiving germination is compared to something like carrots or onions. Give leaf types about 6 to 8 inches between plants. Give butterheads and romaines 10 to 12 inches. Tightly packed plants stress each other and bolt sooner, since spacing stress adds to heat and day-length triggers. Stacking one more pressure onto a plant that's already working against a tight clock and giving it one more reason to give up on leaf production earlier than it otherwise would have. If you're subscribing to this channel because you want to actually understand what's happening in your garden and not just follow steps blindly, now is a good time to hit subscribe. This same depth of detail is in every episode, every crop, every season. A bit of lettuce history nobody asks for. Before we get into harvesting, here's a genuinely strange piece of lettuce trivia that most gardeners never learn. Wild lettuce, a close relative of the garden lettuce you're growing, produces a milky sap called lacticarium when the stem is cut, and that sap has a long documented history as a mild sedative, earning wild lettuce the nickname opium lettuce, even though the chemistry involved has nothing to do with actual opium. Ancient Egyptians associated lettuce with fertility and grew it as a sacred plant dedicated to the god Min, depicting it in tomb paintings alongside other offerings meant to accompany the dead into the afterlife. And Romans reportedly served lettuce at the end of meals specifically because they believed it induced sleep, which is the exact opposite of the modern habit of eating a salad as a starter before the main course. Beatrix Potter leaned on this same folk belief centuries later in the tale of the Flopsy Bunnies, where the young rabbits fall asleep in Mr. McGregor's garden after gorging themselves on lettuces, a detail that reads as a cute throwaway line unless you know the actual historical belief behind it. The garden lettuce we grow today has been bred away from that bitter, sedative-heavy wild ancestor over thousands of years of selection specifically for mildness and sweetness, which is part of why an old, bolted, stressed lettuce plant tastes noticeably more bitter than a young, well-timed one. Stress and age both push the plant's chemistry back in the direction of its wild, more sedative, more bitter roots, essentially undoing thousands of years of selective breeding in the span of a single hot week. Harvesting without ending the plant, cut and come again, is the single most productive way to harvest leaf lettuce. And it's the technique that turns one planting into weeks of usable greens instead of a single one-time cut. Lettuce grows from the center outward, with new leaves emerging from a central growing point. When you harvest outer leaves while leaving the center completely intact, the plant continues producing new leaves from that center. Use clean scissors. Cut outer leaves at about 1 inch above the soil line, leaving the central rosette completely intact. Never cut the center bud. Take no more than 1/3 of the plant per session. Come back every 7 to 10 days. A single planting can give you 3 to 5 harvests over 8 to 12 weeks, which is a dramatically better return than pulling the whole plant at once the way you would with a head-forming crisp head. Harvest in the cool morning. Lettuce harvested in the cool morning is measurably less bitter than the same leaves harvested in the afternoon heat, since the plant's internal moisture and sugar levels are at their best before the day's heat starts stressing it, even on a day that never gets dangerously hot. Hit subscribe here, because we're coming up on the section that explains every lettuce disappointment you've ever had. Bolting, the pivot point. Bolting is the pivot point in every lettuce plant's life. The single event that separates a productive plant from one that's functionally done, even if it's still standing in the bed. When a lettuce plant bolts, it stops putting energy into leaf production and redirects everything toward producing a flower stalk, flowers, and eventually seeds. Leaves become smaller, tougher, and flooded with sesquiterpene lactones, the bitter compounds from the plant's natural defense system, the same broad chemical family responsible for that opium lettuce sap we just talked about. Heat above 80 degrees and increasing day length both trigger bolting. Critically, bitterness can develop from heat stress even before a visible bolt stalk appears, which is exactly why a plant can taste noticeably worse for days before you actually see the stalk shoot up and confirm what's happening. Research found that lettuce grown at 86 degrees produced significantly higher concentrations of bitter compounds than lettuce grown at 68 degrees, even when neither group had bolted yet, meaning the flavor damage from heat stress starts well before the visible failure does. You cannot stop bolting, but you can delay it meaningfully with 3 strategies. Choose slow bolt or heat-resistant varieties, specifically labeled as such, since plant breeders have made real progress on pushing that heat threshold a few degrees higher in certain cultivars. Use 30 to 50% shade cloth during the hottest part of the day, which can buy a genuinely meaningful extra week or 2 of productive harvest in a marginal climate. Keep soil consistently moist, since water stress accelerates bolting by adding physiological pressure on top of heat and day length, essentially giving the plant one more reason to give up early. Early warning of bolting. The center of the plant begins to elongate upward rather than spreading as a flat rosette. Harvest as much as you can at this first sign, since the flavor window is closing quickly from that point forward, even if the plant technically has a few more days left in it. Everything that can go wrong. Lettuce's fast growth cycle means most disease and pest problems have less time to develop than in a slower maturing crop. But the same short window that limits how bad things can get also means there's little margin for catching a problem late and still salvaging a full harvest from it. Downy mildew shows up as yellow patches on upper leaf surfaces with grayish-white, fuzzy growth on the underside, spreading in cool, wet conditions, the same general weather window that favors this disease across several other crops in this series. Improve airflow, avoid overhead watering, remove affected leaves. Powdery mildew appears in warmer, humid conditions as a white powdery coating on leaves, essentially the warm weather cousin of downy mildew, showing up under close to the opposite conditions and giving lettuce growers essentially no safe stretch of weather entirely free of fungal risk. Bottom rot and tip burn appear in dense plantings where airflow is poor, though the two are genuinely different problems that get lumped together by new gardeners more often than they should, and confusing one for the other tends to lead to the wrong fix being applied. Bottom rot is a fungal issue, a soft, brown decay starting where the lower leaves touch damp soil, and it's addressed the same way as most fungal problems in this series. Better spacing, better airflow, and avoiding overhead watering that keeps lower leaves wet. Tip burn is not a disease at all. It's a physiological disorder caused by localized calcium deficiency at the leaf margins, specifically in the youngest, most rapidly expanding leaves, where calcium transport through the plant's water-based system struggles to keep pace with how fast the tissue is growing. It shows up as brown, dried-out edges on inner leaves, and it's made worse by inconsistent watering and by fast growth during hot, humid stretches, since rapid growth outpaces calcium delivery even when there's technically enough calcium in the soil. Consistent watering and avoiding pushing plants too hard with excess nitrogen, which accelerates leaf growth beyond what the plant's calcium transport can support, are the 2 most reliable preventive steps. Cutworms are a specific early-season threat worth knowing about, since they can wipe out young lettuce seedlings almost overnight in a way that looks baffling if you don't know what to look for, especially for a gardener who checked on a healthy bed the evening before and found it decimated by morning. These are the larvae of certain moths, and they hide in the soil during the day, emerging at night to chew through the stems of young seedlings right at the soil line, often severing the plant completely, so that by morning you find a healthy-looking seedling simply lying flat on the ground next to its own stem, roots still intact, but completely disconnected from any way to draw up water. A cardboard collar pushed an inch into the soil around each transplant, extending a couple inches above ground. Physically blocks cutworms from reaching the stem and is a remarkably effective, low-cost defense for a problem that otherwise feels random and unstoppable. Aphids cluster on leaf undersides and in developing heads, often invisible from a quick glance at the top of the plant, while an entire colony builds up in the folds of a forming butterhead or crisphead center. A strong spray of water dislodges most populations effectively, and checking the undersides of leaves regularly, especially on butterhead and crisphead types where the developing head can hide a real infestation from a casual glance, catches problems before they get out of hand. Slugs target plants at soil level overnight and leave irregular holes. The same nighttime damage pattern we saw with strawberries a couple episodes back, and lettuce's tender, low-growing leaves make it just as attractive a target as ripening strawberry fruit was. Reduce soil level moisture and check under leaves at night, since slugs are far easier to catch and remove in the act than to fully eliminate once a population is established. Leaf miners are the larvae of small flies that tunnel directly inside the leaf tissue itself, laying their eggs on the leaf surface before the hatched larvae burrow inward, leaving distinctive pale, winding trails visible through the leaf surface, a kind of damage that looks nothing like chewing or spotting and confuses a lot of gardeners the first time they see it. The trails themselves don't usually threaten the plant's survival, but they render affected leaves unappealing and often bitter right along the damaged tissue, since the plant's own defensive chemistry tends to concentrate around any site of physical injury. Removing and destroying affected leaves as soon as trails appear, before the larvae inside can mature and emerge to start a new generation, is the most effective home garden response, since there's no way to treat the pest once it's already tunneled inside the leaf where no spray or wash can reach it. Lettuce drop, caused by either of two closely related sclerotinia fungi, is one of the more dramatic lettuce diseases, specifically because of how suddenly it acts. Plants wilt rapidly, often collapsing entirely within a day or two, and a close look at the base of the stem usually reveals a white, cottony fungal growth along with small, hard, dark structures called sclerotia, which is how the fungus survives in the soil between seasons, sometimes for years. It thrives in cool, wet soil, and it spreads most aggressively in beds with poor drainage and dense planting, the same conditions that favor several of the other fungal problems in this episode. There's no rescue for an already collapsed plant, and because the sclerotia persist in soil for extended periods, rotating lettuce away from a bed where drop has occurred, ideally for several years, is the only reliable long-term fix. Fusarium wilt of lettuce, distinct from the fusarium diseases we've discussed in other crops, but working through a similar underlying mechanism, blocks the plant's water-conducting tissue from a soil-borne infection at the roots. Affected plants show yellowing and wilting that starts on one side of the plant or one section of leaves before spreading, and cutting the stem open reveals a telltale brown discoloration in the vascular tissue running up the stem. Warm soil favors this disease more than cool soil does, which puts it somewhat later in the typical lettuce season than lettuce drop. Resistant varieties exist for regions where fusarium wilt has been a recurring problem, and as with most vascular wilts in this series, there's no effective treatment once a plant is infected. Watering deserves its own dedicated word here, beyond just keep it moist, because lettuce's shallow, relatively inefficient root system makes it more watering sensitive than a lot of gardeners expect from a crop that otherwise seems so forgiving. 1 inch to 1.5 inches of water per week, whether from rainfall or irrigation, is a reasonable baseline, delivered consistently rather than in large, infrequent doses. A bed that dries out completely between waterings, even briefly, adds exactly the kind of physiological stress described earlier that accelerates bolting and worsens bitterness. Morning watering is generally preferable to evening, since it gives foliage time to dry before nightfall, reducing the window of leaf wetness that favors several of the fungal diseases covered in this section. Extending the season. Succession planting transforms lettuce from a 2-week spring event into a season-long supply, and is genuinely the single highest leverage habit in this entire episode, more impactful on total harvest than any single fertilizer or soil decision covered earlier. Sow a new batch every 2 to 3 weeks through the cool season. 3 overlapping plantings can cover a 12 to 16-week harvest window rather than the single flush most beginner gardeners get from one planting date. In most climates, 2 windows per year work best. Spring starting when soil thaws, fall starting 6 to 8 weeks before first expected frost. The fall lettuce garden is genuinely underused, and it's worth actively planning for rather than treating as an afterthought once summer crops are winding down. Fall lettuce has real advantages. Temperatures move in the right direction, cooling rather than heating, so bolt pressure decreases as the season goes on rather than building toward it. Pest pressure is lower, since a lot of insect populations peak in summer and are declining by the time a fall lettuce planting is maturing. Flavor is often better because plants are never under heat stress at any point in their growth, from seed to harvest. Soil, containers, and staying fed. Soil prep. Lettuce is a light feeder, genuinely one of the least demanding crops in this entire series in terms of raw fertility needs. Work in compost before planting rather than synthetic nitrogen fertilizers. Excess nitrogen promotes lush, soft growth that's more attractive to aphids, and it can also push the rapid, calcium outpacing growth that contributes to tip burn, so more is not automatically better here the way it might feel intuitive to assume. Soil pH between 6.0 and 7.0. Keep soil consistently moist, but not waterlogged. Drip irrigation or soaker hose at soil level is ideal. If you do feel your lettuce needs a boost partway through growth, a light, balanced liquid feed once or twice during the growing period is generally plenty, applied at half the strength you'd use on a heavier feeder like tomatoes. Anything more aggressive than that tends to cause more problems through tip burn and pest attraction than it solves. Container growing is excellent for lettuce, genuinely one of the easiest crops in this series to grow successfully in a pot, given a lightweight, well-draining mix that lettuce roots appreciate. Portable containers let you move plants into shade during heat waves, buying real extra productive days that an in-ground bed simply can't offer. The main adjustment is watering frequency, since containers dry out faster. And a container that's allowed to dry out even once during a hot stretch can trigger the same bolt-accelerating stress described earlier in this episode. Indoor and hydroponic lettuce growing has become a genuinely popular option in recent years, and lettuce is one of the best-suited crops in this entire series for that kind of setup, precisely because of everything we've already covered. It's shallow-rooted, fast-growing, tolerant of a fairly narrow but easily controlled temperature range, and doesn't need pollination the way fruiting crops do. A simple hydroponic setup under grow lights, kept in that 60 to 70 degree sweet spot year-round, sidesteps the entire bolting problem this episode has spent so much time on, since the plant never experiences the heat and day-length triggers that cause it outdoors. It's a genuinely reasonable option for anyone in a climate with a short, cool season, or anyone who wants fresh greens through a winter when nothing is growing outside. And it's worth noting that commercial hydroponic lettuce operations have grown substantially in recent years, specifically because the crop's shallow roots and short growth cycle make it one of the most economically efficient vegetables to produce that way at scale. A piece of commercial agriculture logic that scales down surprisingly well to a countertop unit in a home kitchen. Beyond lettuce, the rest of the leafy green family. Spinach handles light frost better and goes in slightly earlier in spring than lettuce, but bolts even faster in heat, sometimes within days of a hot stretch that lettuce would have tolerated for a week or more. It also has a notably higher oxalic acid content than lettuce, which is worth knowing if anyone in the household has been advised to limit oxalates for kidney stone or other dietary reasons. Arugula grows extremely quickly, harvestable in as little as 25 days, with a distinctive peppery flavor that intensifies noticeably as the plant experiences heat or age, in much the same way lettuce turns bitter under stress. It bolts very fast in heat, even faster than spinach, which makes it best suited to a short, intense early spring or fall window rather than a long season planting. Kale and chard tolerate a much wider temperature range than lettuce and produce through most of summer without bolting the way lettuce does, with kale actually improving in flavor after a light frost, as cold temperatures trigger the plant to convert stored starches into sugars, a similar mechanism to the cold sweetening effect we discussed with carrots. Both are genuinely useful crops to have in rotation, specifically because they cover the hot months when lettuce, spinach, and arugula are all struggling or already finished for the season. Microgreens deserve a quick mention here too. since they're technically a different growing approach rather than a different plant, and a lot of the same leafy crops in this episode, lettuce, arugula, kale, and others, can all be grown as microgreens. Harvested within 1 to 3 weeks of germination at the first true leaf stage, rather than allowed to mature into a full plant. Microgreens are grown densely in shallow trays, harvested with scissors in a single cut, and don't require the same bolting concerns this entire episode is focused on, since the plant is harvested and finished long before heat or day length would ever become a factor. It's a genuinely useful technique for anyone in a climate where the outdoor lettuce growing window is frustratingly short, since a windowsill tray of microgreens can produce a harvest in under 2 weeks regardless of the season outside. And unlike full-grown lettuce, microgreens actually pack a higher concentration of certain nutrients per gram than their mature plant counterparts, since all of that concentrated growth energy is captured in a single small, tender leaf rather than spread across a full-size plant over many weeks. Raised beds versus in-ground rows is a question that comes up for lettuce specifically because the crop's shallow root system makes it more flexible than most of what we've grown this season. In-ground rows work perfectly well if drainage is reasonable, but a raised bed offers 2 genuine advantages worth the extra setup effort. The soil warms and cools faster in a raised bed, letting you hit that critical planting window described earlier a few days sooner in spring. And raised beds make succession planting logistically easier, since you can work a small section at a time without disturbing an entire long row. The combined strategy for year-round leafy greens, lettuce and arugula in early spring, overlapping into kale and chard as temperatures rise through summer, back to lettuce and spinach in fall, and kale through winter and milder climates, with microgreens available as a fast, low-commitment fallback in any season when the outdoor beds aren't producing. The calendar flips entirely depending on where you live. Everything in this episode about cool season and spring and fall windows assumes a temperate climate where summer is the hostile season and winter shuts growth down entirely. That assumption breaks down completely in the deep south and other warm winter regions, and it's worth spelling out explicitly rather than leaving southern gardeners to figure it out by trial and error. In much of Florida, the Gulf Coast, and similar climates, summer is effectively unplantable for lettuce, with heat and humidity both working against the plant simultaneously, while winter becomes the primary growing season, since temperatures there rarely drop into the range that would stop lettuce growth the way a hard freeze does further north. A gardener in Minneapolis and a gardener in Tampa are, for lettuce purposes, operating on close to opposite annual calendars, even though both are nominally growing the same crop following the same rules about cool season preference. The underlying biology in this episode, the 60 to 70 degree sweet spot, the bolting threshold above 80, none of that changes. What changes entirely is which calendar months line up with that temperature window in your specific location, which is exactly why the community comment prompt at the start of this episode matters as much as it does. 2 gardeners watching the same video 3 states apart may need to plant lettuce in nearly opposite seasons to hit the same temperature target. After the harvest, getting it to the table still fresh. Harvest technique matters, but what happens in the 20 minutes after harvest matters almost as much, and it's a step a lot of gardening content skips entirely in favor of stopping the story at the moment the scissors come out, as though the video ends the instant the leaf is cut, and everything after that is assumed to take care of itself. Freshly cut lettuce wilts quickly, since the leaves lose moisture rapidly once separated from the plant's root system, especially if harvested later in the day rather than the cool morning window already recommended. Rinsing leaves promptly in cold water, then drying them thoroughly, whether with a salad spinner or simply laid out on a clean towel, removes field heat and any soil or grit without leaving the leaves sitting in standing water, which can accelerate rot in storage. Store washed, dried lettuce in a container lined with a paper towel, which absorbs excess moisture that would otherwise collect and speed up decay, and refrigerate immediately rather than leaving a harvest basket on the counter while you finish other garden tasks. Handled this way, cut lettuce leaves generally hold their quality for about a week in the refrigerator, noticeably longer than the wilted, sad result of leaves rinsed briefly and tossed loose into a bag. Not all leaves are created equal. Worth a quick aside here, since it comes up constantly in comments on every lettuce video. The different types covered in this episode aren't just different in growing habit, they're meaningfully different in nutrition too, and the general rule is a useful shortcut worth keeping in your back pocket regardless of which type you end up growing. Darker, more pigmented leaves tend to carry more nutrients than pale ones, a pattern that holds true across most leafy vegetables, not just lettuce specifically. Iceberg-type crisp-head lettuce, prized largely for its crunch and its long shelf stability, is genuinely one of the least nutrient-dense options in the entire leafy green category, made up overwhelmingly of water with comparatively little in the way of vitamins A, C, or K relative to darker greens. Romaine and darker leaf types carry meaningfully more of those same nutrients, and the deep greens covered in the Beyond Lettuce section later in this episode, kale and spinach specifically, outpace all of the lettuce types by a wide margin. None of this makes crisp head lettuce a bad choice. Crunch and mild flavor have their place, especially for anyone new to eating salads regularly. But it's worth knowing that the crop with the longest, fussiest growing requirements in this episode is also, nutritionally, the least rewarding of the bunch, which is a genuinely funny bit of irony once you notice it. Starting seeds with a bit more precision. The seed starting guidance earlier in this episode covers the basics, but a couple of refinements are worth adding for anyone who's tried lettuce from seed before and gotten spotty, uneven germination. Seed starting trays or soil blocks work better than open flats for lettuce specifically, since the tiny seeds and shallow planting depth described earlier make them easy to accidentally bury unevenly across an open tray. With some seeds ending up too deep to receive the light, they need to germinate reliably. A cell tray or soil block gives each seed its own small, controlled planting spot, making that shallow, barely covered placement much easier to achieve consistently across an entire batch. Bottom watering, setting the tray in a shallow reservoir of water rather than watering from above, further protects against dislodging or burying the tiny seeds during the germination window, when they're most vulnerable to being disturbed. Once true leaves appear, typically within 1 to 2 weeks under good conditions, a very dilute, quarter-strength liquid fertilizer supports the transition from seed reserves to independent feeding, though full-strength feeding at this stage risks burning the still delicate young roots, companions, and a few that don't belong nearby. Lettuce pairs well with taller, slower crops like tomatoes and peppers, using the brief window before those plants fill in to take advantage of the extra light while it's available, then benefiting from a bit of afternoon shade cast by the taller plants as the season heats up and lettuce would otherwise be struggling. Carrots and radishes are traditional lettuce companions as well, since none of the three compete heavily for the same root depth or nutrients, and radishes in particular mature so quickly that they're often out of the ground before lettuce even needs the extra space. On the other side of that ledger, lettuce grown too close to broccoli, cabbage, and other large brassicas tends to struggle, not from any documented chemical antagonism the way fennel affects strawberries, but simply because those brassicas grow large and dense enough to shade out lettuce excessively and outcompete it for water and nutrients in a shared bed. It's less a hard rule than a spacing and timing consideration. Lettuce tucked in early, before the brassicas have bulked up, generally does fine, while lettuce planted after the brassicas are already established usually loses that competition. Quick myth busting before we wrap up. The idea that lettuce needs full sun the way tomatoes or peppers do is genuinely backwards for most of the season. In cooler spring weather, full sun is fine and even beneficial, but as temperatures climb, some afternoon shade is a genuine advantage rather than a compromise, buying extra productive days before bolt pressure takes over. Treating lettuce like a full sun crop year-round, the same way you would a fruiting vegetable, is one of the more common reasons gardeners in warmer climates see their lettuce bolt earlier than it needs to. Another persistent myth, that all lettuce varieties bolt at roughly the same rate, so variety choice barely matters. It matters quite a bit, as the heat tolerance differences between leaf, butterhead, romaine, and crisp head types described earlier in this episode make clear, and choosing a slow bolt variety specifically bred for a warmer climate can meaningfully extend a harvest window that a standard variety would have already lost to bitterness. That's the complete lettuce and leafy green story, from a clock-driven biology most gardeners never get explained to them, all the way through to the paper towel in a storage container that keeps a harvest fresh a few extra days. Timing above all else, more than in almost any other crop in this series. The right type for the right season and the right level of gardening experience. Continuous harvesting through cut and come again, rather than a single one-time cut. Succession planting to bridge the gaps between plantings and stretch a short window into a long one. A brief summer pause rather than a fight you cannot win against the heat. however tempting it is to keep trying. And a fall season that's often better than the spring one if you plan for it rather than treating it as an afterthought. Subscribe because we've got carrots, green beans, squash, and herbs still ahead, and every one of them gets this same treatment. Next time, carrots. The entire productive part of the plant is hidden underground for its entire growing life. And the most common problems don't reveal themselves until the moment you dig it up.